Okay, so as you've seen in past lessons, we've looked at orthographic, and this was the box that in class we've used previously. And when we are laying out orthographic, we have a top view, a front and a side. So you have one like this, one like this, and one like this, and they need to be laid out accordingly. Okay, I will say as well, if we can, try and make sure that they are parallel. So these lines should be parallel in a straight line like this. This one is a little bit off, but generally it's actually not a bad example as well. This should be a straight line here. So put it another way, one should be like that, one should be like that. Okay, and we know it's a straight line. Okay, so that's orthographic, but now we're going to look at isometric. Isometric we did talk about before. Here's a really nice example from a student, and again I give them the money box. Now we're not looking at it at this angle, we are looking at it effectively like so. Okay, one thing you need to bear in mind with isometric is all lines should be parallel. So these lines here, if I'm taking this box, this line, and this line should all be running parallel like so. I always say it's like train tracks. So we imagine if this keeps going, it's going up that way, that's going that way. They're never going to get further away from each other, but they're never going to cross. Okay, they're like train tracks. They will always be going in a straight line. Likewise, these ones here, this one here. Okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay. The other thing you need to think about is wherever your first point is, the lowest point on the page. So this point here. If we were sitting it on a line at the bottom of the page like that, this angle here would be 30 degrees. This angle here, if you had your protractors, would be 30 degrees. Okay. To help you, I have got gridded paper, and these lines, when you put your work on top, you should be able to see the lines underneath. If I do this, hopefully it picks up on the camera. I'm not sure how well that is picking up on the camera. You should just be able to see. You can see the lines underneath, and that kind of is like a template or a guide for you to follow. Okay, so we're going to have a go at doing isometric. The sheet I've provided for you is this one here. Okay, this one is attached. So on Show My Homework, we need to be finding this sheet, and I have also attached this gridded paper. For this very first task, you may find that you don't need the gridded paper, or you don't actually wish to use it. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. What I would kind of take away is, you know, you can do it freehand, and I'm not even that worried if you are choosing not to use a ruler for this task. I'm not going to be looking to see if the lines are perfectly straight. I'm more interested that these lines are parallel and all of your separate lines meet up as they should. Okay, so I have a couple of little rules when I teach isometric lessons to make things easier, or this was the way I was taught. I look at, I start off, and whatever I'm doing, let's say I'm drawing a crate, I will start off with some sort of tick. So I'll draw a tick like so. So if I'm drawing this crate here, or this here, I would do a tick. Then the next step, step 2, I do a crow's foot. So I do this, and I put this line up here. Step 3, you've done your tick, you've done your crow foot. I then go on to garden fork, so like this. Okay, and what's really important is that these 3 lines are all the same height. Because if you were looking at a box like so, this height, and this height are all the same. One of the biggest problems we sometimes get when we are drawing in isometric is if we have this line lower, then when we try and connect it all together, of course it will look unusual. If I draw, it's hard for me to actually draw it incorrectly because my brain is so tuned to how it should be, but I'll try and do an example. So if we do our crow's foot like that, and then let's say we do our garden fork, and for argument's sake we make this line and this line really small. If it doesn't line up, if it isn't all the same measurement, then rather than look like that, it'll end up looking, this breaks my brain trying to draw it like this, but it'll end up looking like this, and of course that's wrong, okay? Should look like that. That should be the same height. So we measure that, and I always not always, but generally, if I'm drawing like this freehand, I will just do it by hand. I will just measure by eye. So I'll see that measurement there, put a little dot, do the measurement again, put a little dot, and if I connect those up, now hopefully that should all line up. We can rub out that line, you don't need that one. And as I say, hopefully you notice this line is parallel with this line. Train tracks, this line is parallel with this line. Okay, so you do your tick, your crow's foot, your garden fork, and then you finish off the crate. So if I'm doing a tick, I'll draw this really quickly. Garden fork, crow's foot, garden fork, and then we finish it off. So we look at that line, that's parallel. We look at this line, that one is parallel. Then we're looking up here. So 1, 2, 3. If you're unsure another way to do it, some students like doing it like this. We get our ruler, we measure, and then we can measure like so. If you find that's helpful, you can always draw this line bigger than it needs to be as long as you draw it lighter, because then you can always rub out what you don't need. Okay, and again, let's do that again. So that line is parallel with that line, so we know it must be parallel with this line. Let's draw a line that's far too big. Rub out what we don't need. And try and get into the habit of pressing lightly on the page with your pencil. I see quite often students really digging their pencil into the page. Now the problem with that is they rub out their work. We've got all these messy, incorrect lines that are embedded or engraved almost into our page. We don't want that. So if you draw lighter, you can always go over it again. Okay? So, I'm just going to hammer the point home. Train tracks, this one, and this one, all going in the same direction. These ones, there, and there. Follow these arrows. But don't forget, these ones, the vertical lines, they're all parallel as well. So that line, this line, this line. Okay? If they are off for any reason, what you end up with is like a pyramid effect, like so, which we don't want. Or I sometimes say like a Toblerone segment. We don't want it like that. We want, if we are drawing a box, forget this part, if we are drawing a box or a crate, you have to remember those lines need to be parallel as well. Okay, so they're my rules. Okay, so we take this, and I'm not going to use the gridded paper. If you wish to, some students have it on the screen and they push their piece of paper up against the screen. Be careful, don't obviously damage your screen, but you can hold it up as a guide and you can see what you are drawing. So I'm going to just have a go at this, but I'm choosing not to use the gridded paper. So if I'm looking at that again, let's start as I said before. So we'll do a tick. Then we know we do our crow's foot. So that's that, and that. This line and this line, remember they need to be the same height. So I can do a little dot there. Do a little dot there. You don't have to, you might be able to do it by eye, but it's not a bad idea, okay? So there's our garden fork. And then we make sure that's parallel. We look at that one, make sure that's parallel. Again, you see I'm drawing lightly on the page. I'm not digging my pencil into the paper. This one here, make sure that's parallel. And that one there, make sure that's parallel. Okay, now we have our inside section of this. It's almost like a cinder block, isn't it? So what I would do, I would just look at, okay, well, why don't we break that down as if that's another rectangle inside? So again, I'm making sure this is no different, just because it's an element inside, it still needs to be parallel. This line needs to be parallel. This line needs to be parallel, as does this one to this one. This one to this one. Okay, then we can break it apart, so we need to add that element in. Like so. And again, I can rub out the elements I don't need. And these inside elements, again, don't forget, I get students, they do all of this, and then they end up putting this line over across like this. It's exactly the same rules. This line here, it still would line up. So it needs to be like that. This line here still would line up like that. So if you've drawn it correctly, that's what it should look like. Then you can, if you wish, go over it again. I won't, okay? I'm going to get my sheet here. Where is it? This one. I've got too many sheets. And I've broken the pieces down into smaller segments, okay? So this is, you know, just drawing, again, starting with a tick, doing our garden, crow's foot, garden fork, and then finishing the shape off. Same with here, that would be our tick, and then our crow's foot in that instance would only be as high as that. It's not a very tall element. So effectively your step 2 would be this, and then that. Step 3 would be that and that. Okay? So you can see, you might have to modify it, but effectively you're doing the same thing every time. I'm going to talk about a shape like this. This is the second shape. You don't have to do these in the order that are presented on the page. If you want to build up, start with this one, go on to this one, go over to this one, that's absolutely fine. I would say, even though this is the second one, this is one of the harder ones. And I'll just break down how I would do this shape here. Okay, so rather than look at the whole shape, I would break that down into 3 segments. So if I'm breaking this down, I would put a dotted line here, and I'm only going to worry about this section here. So this, almost like the foundations or the ground floor of this block. So again, I'll sound like a broken record, but we start with a tick. Make sure our angles as they should be. Always check these angles. They look like they're lining up. Do our crow's foot. Do our garden fork. Now forget these top sections. Forget there, well, I've got my thumb over it. We are literally just drawing, no, I'm going to draw lightly. We are drawing the bottom block or brick. Okay? So I'm finishing that off. Like so. So if I draw this side on, this shape, think of it almost like a video game, and you've completed one level, you're going on to the next level, going on to the next level. So we've done this section here, we've completed this level. We're going to move on to this level here now. So it might be that you need to then almost rub some of the lines out, but they are crating lines. They are there to guide you. Okay, so we'll think, hang on, that's where the next point is. So maybe put a little dot. We're going to do the same again. We're going to do a tick. Okay, and it ends there. Let's do our tick so it goes up to there. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Crow's foot, garden fork, and then finish it off. So we finish that off, like so. I'm going to keep saying this, but draw lightly on the page. Okay, now we finished that level. Now all we've got left is this. It's almost like a gold bar or a mini brick that sits on top. So I now know I don't need that line anymore. I can rub that one out. Okay, I can rub that out. Now, if you don't line these up quite right, don't worry about it. Mine's a little bit different. So mine, it's almost like it's going behind the brick. I don't mind that, that's fine. Okay, so now we're just doing this section. So again, we're doing our tick, which will be almost like a backwards tick. So the shorter end will be like this. And it goes like that. We then do our line here, another line here, another line there. Make sure they're all the same height, remember. And then we can rub these out because we know we don't need them anymore. We're just there temporarily. And then we draw our shape like this. And again, I know I don't need that. And again, we've completed that level. And then if you wish to go over it, you can. So you can see this version. And again, I did the exact same. This was for my other Year 7 class, okay? But I did the exact same thing. Okay, I might talk about one more shape on this sheet, just to kind of give you an idea. I'll talk about this shape here, okay? So, if you've got elements to the side, try and break them down into smaller shapes. Don't think, how am I going to tackle all of this? How am I going to tackle all of these? I would think to myself, okay, well, I could break these down into separate elements. So I could say, okay, I'm only going to worry about this element here to begin with, and this element here. Okay, imagine if it's glass, it would be, you would see the rest of it there. Then we'd say, okay, we'll move on to this section, move on to this section. But for this one, forget about these 2 feet, and all we're going to do is draw this crate area first of all. So we do that. I'm going to do this quickly now because I've done it quite a few times. Draw our crate, like so. Now, this element here, what do we know? Well, we know this line is parallel. So we know if we do that line, we can just keep elongating that line all the way down here for the time being. What else do we know? Well, we know that if there's the bottom of that line, we can put a point there. So I can move my pencil up and I can do a little dot there. We also know that if it finishes there, it's that much longer, isn't it? Now you could get your ruler out, but I'm going to do it by eye. We'll say, that's probably 1/2 centimetre, 5 millimetres. So about here, about 5 millimetres, put another point there. Okay, then draw my line in. That's that line there. You might need lines rubbing out, but that's okay for the time being. We also know this is parallel. If this was sitting along this line, that's parallel. So I can put a line in there, like so. Actually, I might just rub these out, just so it doesn't get complicated. And I'll go over what I've just done. We know that that sits along that line, so let's draw up to about there. We know this line and this line are parallel, so we look at that line. We draw another line up here. We know that this line and this line is parallel, so we look at that, do that one, do that one. We also know that if we were to draw another line along here, this line and this line, the feet are the same height, so we could draw a line like that. And let's draw that line in. And effectively, we're doing the same thing, aren't we? So that line we know is parallel. This one, and this one. It's almost like a puzzle. You're breaking it down into small sections. So this one, therefore this one, therefore also this one. Let's just put that there. We know this line, this one, and this one are parallel. So you look at that one, we look at that one, and then finally there's a straight line there. Now there's stuff I don't need here anymore, rub that out. So finally, that parallel line, this one needs to be parallel, like so. I'm just going to draw those in because it might be hard to see on your screen. So I'm just going to draw those in darker. Okay, and then of course your crating lines are no longer needed. So we can rub those out, like so. Okay, so I've done, you can see there I've done the same thing. So break them down into smaller sections. Okay, if you're looking at this one, think of that part there, that's level 1. Almost forget about this, Toblerone segment that sits on top. You're only worrying about that bottom part. This part here, I would break it up so that there's a crate, there's a separate crate there, and then almost this capital C, that's a separate shape. So I would draw it in stages. You might want to do the C first of all, it's up to you. This one here, I drew this very quickly. I did a tick, followed my lines, did that box, and then effectively I broke this section up and I did that as a completely separate shape. And then of course you rub it out and make it one complete item. Okay? Hopefully we can all have a go at that. If you think your lines aren't lining up or it doesn't look right, stop and think. Let's look at this one. Are my lines parallel? That's the biggest tip. Are they train tracks all going in the same direction? If they are going off like this, like a cone, that's wrong. That won't line up as it should. If you've got lines that end up connecting together like that, that also will mean that, you know, your design won't look as it should. Okay? So I'm going to stop this video now. Hopefully that's straightforward. When we've finished, I'd like you to upload your work to Seesaw. I've got a class code, so please upload your work, and I'd love to see your final designs. Okay, best of luck.